I'm so excited to be with you guys this morning. I want to welcome those of you watching us online. We're so glad you're a part of our BC family. If we have not met, my name is Bradley. I am one of the associate pastors here and also the worship pastor. And you get me today because Pastor Todd gets to go party with Ocon, which is awesome, guys. It's so cool to see where Ocon is at now because for so long this was a vision that God had planted inside of Pastor Todd, and for us to be 1 year in and to see it not surviving but thriving and making such a huge impact on that city is such an amazing thing. But I'm excited to share with you this morning what God has laid on my heart. We're in this series that we are calling Tall Tales. We're looking at stories we tell ourselves, really looking at the lies that we tell ourselves that not only cloud our vision of what God wants for us, but I encourage you that if you have missed a week, so this is the third week of the series, Pastor Todd has already talked through 2 lies. If you've missed a week, I encourage you to go back online and check those out because those two messages that he preached are just so full of truth, and it'd be so good for you to hear it. But today we're going to look at a common lie that we tell ourselves when it comes to our faith. Now, it can go farther than our faith. This can be a lie that we tell ourselves in our everyday life, but I really want to focus on what it means to us and our faith. Has anyone ever walked into a situation where you looked around and thought you just didn't belong because you were unqualified for the task? Maybe you thought that you didn't have the skill to complete the task, and it really put you in this awkward and uncomfortable situation. Like, I could spend the rest of my time up here this morning sharing those kinds of stories with you because that's been a common occurrence through my life. But there's one specific story that sticks out in my mind that I want to share with you guys, okay? So I remember when Lisa and I found out that we were expecting for the first time. We were super excited to be parents. It's something that we had looked forward to, and God blessed us with a pregnancy. And our insurance was the kind of insurance that didn't give you an ultrasound until you were 5 months into the pregnancy. So I remember that day when the time came to come and have the ultrasound. I was so excited to go and see this little blob on a screen, right? Like, we get so excited, and it's just you can't tell anything from it, but it was exciting because to me, that made it like super official and super real, right? We're going to see pictures of our baby. And I remember Lisa lying on the table and this person starts the ultrasound. And she's looking around, and then all of a sudden she just looks up and she says, "I'll be right back. I've got to go get my supervisor." And then she bolts out the door. Yeah, like, you see what's wrong with that picture, right? I mean, context, people, context. If you're going to do that and you're going to rush out, you need to give me some background information on why you're rushing out, because now my head's just running around like, what's wrong? What's going wrong? I like, is everything okay? And then the supervisor walks back in. We're nervous, and she sits down, and before she starts doing anything, she says, "Do twins run in your family?" You guys know what I'm talking about, right? And then God, the excitement goes to this nervous feeling because we just got hit with a BOGO offer from God. And I'm sitting here like, we just bought a little sedan. We just bought a 2-bedroom house. And now we've already outgrown them. Like, God, you have a great sense of humor. But so that nervous feeling slowly faded away because I got more and more excited because we got to go and we got to talk to our family and to share this wonderful news with them. Like, hey, we're having twins. Isn't that exciting? And then the time comes for them to be delivered. And we're in the delivery room, and the baby, Abby and Addie, come out healthy, and they are so precious, and they're so pretty and beautiful. And the doctor looks at me and says, "Okay, now I need you to put one arm like this and the other arm like this, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to give you both babies, and you're going to walk out, show them to your family, and then we're going to take them to the nursery." And so they place Abby and Addie in my arms, and I'm looking down in that moment, and like my heart is just full, like, because I'm looking down at these 2 beautiful little girls that are super healthy, and it's just a blessing from God. But then in that moment, I looked down and I felt so unqualified for what God had placed before me. Like, not only am I responsible for one life. I'm responsible for two little girls. And I kept telling myself that I wasn't ready. See, we tend to look past just how powerful the things that we tell ourselves can be on our overall sense of self-worth or on our ability to do something. Like self-talk is a real thing, and it can be detrimental to us. Psychologist Dr. Clifford Lazarus said this. He said, self-talk for an unfortunately large number of people consists of telling themselves what's wrong with them. And listen to what he says here. He says this. He says, tell yourself often enough that you'll fail, and you almost certainly will. Now, isn't it crazy that it's hard enough that we have to deal with other people in our life that seem like they're just out to get us, and we have to deal with people coming and tell us why we can't do something, or we have people that come and tell us why we'll never be something, or why we'll never accomplish this certain thing. But then if we add to that what we're actually telling ourselves, it's no wonder why we give into this lie that we're unqualified to do anything. See, growing up, I had super supportive parents who really instilled in me in an early age that I could do anything that I wanted to do. Like I could be anything that I wanted to be. Whatever I set my mind to, I could do. And they tried to give me that all the time. But even with all of that support from them, there came a time in my life that this was not too long ago where I didn't believe that God would ever use me in full-time ministry. Like I never thought that I would be up here doing what I'm doing today. See, I felt this call and this draw on my life that I was supposed to be a worship pastor, but it seems like every church that I went to before this one, they would bring me on staff part-time with the promise of, hey, start out part-time, and then we'll make you full-time. So there's this dream that I'm chasing, and they're like dangling it out in front of me, but no matter how many times I went to a church, it always ended with it just being part-time. So I had this dream, but then I started telling myself that I wasn't good enough. I started telling myself that I wasn't talented enough. I started telling myself that I wasn't qualified enough to do full-time ministry. And what happened is that led to me actually believing that about myself. At first, it was just words, but then I started to believe this. The knowledge of God's call on my life and the knowledge of God's view of my life slowly faded away to this false view of what I made my life out to be. And this is the lie that I want to look at today. A lie that we tell ourselves when it comes to our faith, a lie we tell ourselves when it comes to being called by God, chosen by God, and used by God. It's a lie that a lot of you may have told yourself at one time. It's a lie that some of you in this place right now may be telling yourself at this current time. So the tall tale or the lie that we're going to look at today is this: I can't be used by God because I am blank. I can't be used by God because I am blank. And we're going to fill in that blank with a couple of things. And to help us walk through this, we're going to look at someone in the Bible who went through this exact same thing. We're going to look at Moses. Okay, we're going to look at how Moses told himself this lie. This great leader that we know who helped lead the Israelites out of bondage and into the promised land, at one time felt like he wasn't good enough to answer God's call. And see, I think it's important that we look at these heroes of the faith that are in the Bible and we stop putting them up on this pedestal, right? Because a lot of times we look at how God used these people and we think we'll never measure up to that because they were just so good, they did so many good things. When the reality is when you dig into Scripture like we're about to do right now, these people were just as messed up as we are. They were messed up. They missed the mark, but God still chose to use them. So we're going to look at Moses. See, here's the thing. Sometimes it's not what others say about us that pulls us off of God's plan for our life, but it's our words and our doubts that keep us from fulfilling our God-given destiny. It's self-talk. So let's look at Moses. I want to pick up at an important moment in Moses' life. We're going to look at Exodus chapter 3, and we're going to read verses 1 through 11. Now, this is a familiar scene for a lot of us. We grew up hearing this story, but this is the account of where Moses is at the burning bush, and God is speaking to him through this bush. So let's start with verse 1. It said, "Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, 'I'll go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up.' When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, 'Moses, Moses.' And Moses said, 'Here am I.'" I wonder how many times we go through our life and we're so focused on our normal everyday routine that we miss God showing up in some unexpected way. Like here is Moses, who's going about his daily ritual, tending the flock, walking the same road he's gone down time and time again, doing the same thing. And he looks over in the distance and he sees this bush that's on fire. And he has two choices. He can either go about his routine or he can go and check out this thing. And little did he know when he goes and checks out this bush that he's actually going to hear from God himself. We expect God to show up here on Sundays, right? We expect in this setting that he's going to show up and he's going to do something. But do you expect him to show up in a way in your everyday life where he's going to show up on the scene in an unexpected way and actually speak truth into your life? But we have to be in tune with him to answer that call. And Moses did. Let's continue on. Verse 5. "Do not come any closer," God said. "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Then he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, "I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey." Now, I'm going to pause again right here and give you a little sermon inside a sermon because this is too good to miss out on. Notice what's happening here. The Israelites are crying out to God because they're in bondage, right? Do you think this is the first time that they've cried out to God? They've been crying out for a long time, and God hasn't answered their prayer. But it says in this scripture, it says the Lord has seen the misery. He's heard their cries, and he is concerned about their suffering. We get so caught up in asking God to help us out in our situations, to walk us through a difficult time. And the moment that God doesn't answer, that's a lot of times the moments where we just say, "Why aren't you here for me, God? Like, what am I doing wrong? Are you not going to show up?" But we can look at scripture like this right here with what he was telling Moses and know that we have to rely on God's timing. Just because God hasn't given you an answer yet doesn't mean that he doesn't care. Scripture shows us that he's concerned, but we have to wait on his timing because the answer will come. That was free. Let's continue on in verse 9. "And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." So God's heard the cry of the Israelites, and he's decided to rescue them. He's going to come and finally answer their prayer and to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and bring them into a land where they're not just going to merely get by and survive, but they're actually going to thrive. And God has looked down and he's handpicked Moses to pull this off. Now, God could easily do this on his own. Like, he doesn't need a human to help him out, but he has chosen Moses to be the face of what he's about to do. And Moses is hearing straight from God. So hearing this from God, you would think that Moses would be confident, right? Like there's this burning bush and there's the voice of God that's telling him like, "Moses, I'm going to use you. It's going to be okay. Go and do this thing." But let's look at how Moses responds to God's call. And I feel like his response is like many of ours whenever God places a call on our life. We have this same response. Verse 11 says this, "But Moses said to God, 'Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?'" 3 words that summarize how most of us feel or we have felt at one time when it comes to being used by God. I know I've used this excuse so many times. It's not, you may have not used these three same words, but it's going to sound a lot like what you've said. And those three words are, who am I? God, who am I? Who am I that you want me to witness to someone? God, who am I that you want me to lead a bridge group? God, who am I that you want me to serve? Who am I that you want to show me grace? God, who am I that you would choose to use me knowing what I've done? Who am I? See, Moses' reply here, let's not get confused. Moses' reply and question isn't one questioning God. He's not questioning God because he understands who God is. He understands what God can do. What he's actually doing is he's questioning himself. Moses asks, who am I, God? He's essentially saying, God, look, I'm not the right person for the job. I'm not good enough. I'm not skilled enough. I'm not bold enough. I'm not capable of doing what you're asking me to do right now. Like, you've picked the wrong person. We have to remember at this point that Moses is actually a murderer. Like, he's actually a fugitive on the run. Like, he was born into bondage, then through a God-sized event, he was actually given to the Egyptians and was raised in royalty, was a part of the Egyptians, right? And then this thing happens to where he starts to notice how the Israelites are being treated. And it angers him because he knows that's his people. And then one day he actually sees an Israelite, he actually sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew person. And what does he do? Does he walk in and like push him away? No, he walks in and he actually kills the Egyptian. He kills him, and then he hides his body in the sand. So we're looking at a person that is not perfect. He is far from perfect. He tried to do the right thing. Like, he tried to step in and deliver his people, but he did it in his own way, which was the wrong way. So one lie I think Moses is saying to himself here is this, and this is a lie that we tell ourselves. I can't be used by God because I am a failure. I can't be used by God because I am a failure. See, Moses is hearing this big, huge, important thing that God is wanting to do, but Moses can't see the possibility of this happening because he's looking past who God says he is, and he's looking inward at how he sees himself. See, in his eyes, he's done so many wrong things. He's missed the mark so many times, and because of his failure, he thinks he can't be used by God to do great things. And not only that, I think Moses is really scared. He's fearful of the task that God is asking him to do because he's just afraid he's going to mess that up too. You guys ever get to a point where you've just messed up so much that you don't want to do anything new because you feel like, well, I'm just going to fail at that as well, so I might as well not even try. See, our failure and our fear can give us a false view of our future. It can give us a false view of our promise. Have you ever felt unqualified because of your past? I think if we're real, most of us have. If I'm being 100% honest with you right now, there have been Sundays before where I walk in those doors and get ready to lead worship on a Sunday, and the moment my feet hit this platform, I feel like I can't do it. I feel so unworthy because I've sinned and I've messed up that week before. And then the moment that I walk into church, all that guilt and all that shame slowly starts to come back. And it starts to cloud my mind. And I think, I can't stand before these people and be used in this way. And I would say it's probably a 100% chance that either some of us here or somebody that's watching online feels like they can't be used by God because of their past sins, because of their past mistakes. And see, that is what sin does. This is what sin does to us. It blinds us to the truth. It robs us of our identity. See, here is Moses right here. He is face to face with God, who is telling him that he is choosing Moses to carry out this God-sized plan. But Moses' sin leads him to doubt, even when God himself is telling Moses that he is chosen. He can't listen to the voice of God because he can't get out of his own way. See, sin has the power to change our course by taking our eyes off of the one who has chosen us and putting the focus on ourselves. And when that happens, we lose the narrative of God's story and instead focus on the narrative of our own story. God calls us to do something great, but we tell him we can't because we've done something wicked. God calls us to follow him through the difficult, but we choose to hide from him because of the shame that we have in our life. All the while, we're running from the very one who looks past who we actually are and sees the truth of who we are, which is chosen, which is somebody who is saved by grace and chosen by the actual creator of the world. Because here's the truth that you don't need to miss out on. God chooses to use us, flaws and all. He doesn't choose to use us if we're perfect. He chooses to use us, flaws and all. After Moses questions God by asking, "Who am I?" God reassures Moses. He steps in and he gives Moses a little bit of confidence that he won't be doing this alone. Verse 12 says this, "And God said, I will be with you." Moses, I hear your doubt. I see your concern, but let me tell you this. I will be with you. Now, this should also put Moses' mind at ease, right? This should put it at ease. He should be good to go at this point. It should, but it doesn't. Moses then goes into a second lie about his life, another lie that we like to tell ourselves as well whenever we think we're unqualified to do something. And that second lie is this: I can't be used by God because I'm not skilled enough. Let's jump to Exodus chapter 4. We're going to look at verse 10. We're still at the burning bush. God is still having this conversation with Moses. And God is actually showing Moses different signs that will help Moses prove to others that he did, in fact, have a conversation with God. Because Moses realizes how crazy it's going to be for him to go back to his people and say, like, "Hey, I talked with God." And they're going to be like, "Oh, really? How'd that happen?" "Well, it was through a burning bush." And people are going to be like, "Yeah, okay, Moses, you're crazy." So Moses knows this, so he asks God for some signs, and God is showing him some signs that he can use to help prove to his people that he did have a conversation with him. And in the middle of God doing all of this explaining how he'll use Moses and how he'll help Moses, Moses interrupts God again for a second time. This is what Moses said to the Lord in verse 10. "Pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue." Isn't it just like us to make excuses whenever someone tries to encourage us to do something? I remember whenever Lisa and I was dating, and guys, Lisa has like this angelic voice, and I might be biased, but I'm actually not. I'm just up here speaking truth, okay? And I remember whenever we first started dating, and I heard her sing, and I was just blown away. And I had just started learning to play guitar, and I thought, man, we'll make a good team. Like, I can play the guitar, and she can sing, and this will be great. And that wasn't good enough for Lisa. See, Lisa would always want me to sing in front of her. Like, we get in the car, and a song would come on, and she'd turn on the radio, and she'd look at me, and she'd be like, "Sing to me." I'd be like, "Nope. I'll talk to you. I'll say the lyrics. I ain't singing." And she would just go and go and go and try and try and try. My answer was always no. But guys, let me tell you, if you're dating or you're looking to date, like, there's going to come this time where this pretty girl comes and you fall in love. And then if she says jump, you're going to say, "How high?" Like, she kept, and finally, guys, I'm just like, okay, this is not going to stop, so I'm just going to give in, and I'm just going to sing. And I started singing, but the thing about it is Lisa saw something inside of me that God had placed in me that I didn't know I had myself, and God was using her to pull it out of me. But I was too stubborn to listen. It's just like us humans to have a talent or an ability that was gifted to us by God. never to be used because we can only see what our eyes tell us, and we can't see ourselves through the eyes of how God sees us. And we can't see our life through the eyes of how he wants to use us. We end up suppressing abilities and callings and talents that we never knew we had in us because we can't stop making excuses and just get out of God's way and allow him to work through us. God, yet again, though, because God is gracious and God is patient, gives Moses words that should encourage him and help him to see that because of God, he is capable. Let's look at verse 11 and verse 12. The Lord said to him, "Who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives the sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say." Moses gives another excuse, and again, God tells him that he will be with him. He's saying, look, Moses, look, dummy, stop being stupid. I gave you your lips. I gave you your tongue. I gave you your vocal cords. And I'm going to use them in a way you never thought was possible. Because Moses, don't you know that if I made them, I can use them? Like, don't you know that if I made your lips, if I made your tongue, that I can use those things to bring me glory? So not only is God saying that he will be with him, but he will tell Moses what to say. He's like, I'm going to tell you what to say. I like to think of God as Moses' confidence monitor. And you may be like, what are you talking about? I know you guys don't think that when we get up here to lead worship and to sing with you guys, that you guys get lyrics and we just like memorize all of these songs, right? Like that would be a great superpower, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret that we use to cheat. We use a thing called a confidence monitor. So like if you look back on the back wall, there's a TV that's right below the sound booth and it's got like 2 lines. So what you're looking at right there is our confidence monitor. Like, so on the top part of the screen, we see the words that we're singing, what you actually see, but then we see what's coming up next, right? So we always know before you guys know what we're going to sing next. Like, we use that because that thing has saved my life a couple of times. Yeah, that's a lifesaver. But this is what I'm saying, like, God is going to be that for Moses. He's going to tell Moses what to say now, but he's also going to give him insight on what to say next. God has been patient with Moses up to this point, even with excuse after excuse. God still reassures Moses that he's got him. Moses, I've got you. But Moses, if being nothing but consistent, goes back to God with a final excuse. Verse 13, and he ramps this one up a little bit. But Moses said, "Pardon your servant, Lord. Please send somebody else." That is almost comical. Like, he's like, hey, God, listen, I hate to interrupt you again. Like, I know you're doing all this explaining, and I trust you and everything. And I know you're all powerful, and you have everything under control. But you're not catching what I'm throwing at you. Like, I've tried twice to explain to you what I'm wanting done, but now I'm just going to come out and say it, okay? Like, if it wouldn't be too much to ask, could you please send somebody else to do it? Maybe, please send anybody else other than me. See, Moses sees this task, and he feels like he's unqualified for. And what does he do? He takes this out to another level by actually asking God, who knows all, who handpicked Moses in the first place, to send somebody else. Moses was chosen to do something great, but he couldn't get out of his own head and realize that the ability that he didn't have was the ability that God was looking for in the first place. And I wonder how many times we've missed out on God's plan for our life because we've doubted ourselves instead of relying on God to use us in a way that only God could. And we end up using the same excuse that Moses did, to send someone else. hey, God, I understand that you're calling me to witness to this person at work, but I really wouldn't know what to say. So could you just send somebody else instead of me? Hey, God, I know that you're asking me to serve and you're wanting me to do this thing, but I don't have the time, or I don't even think I have the ability. Could you just please send somebody else to do it? There's plenty of people. And what we end up doing when we use this excuse is this. We end up trusting our own skill instead of trusting the one who will supply you with the skill you need. And what actually happens is we end up missing the blessing because we doubt the blesser. It's a dangerous place to be in. Moses was too caught up in what he couldn't do that he missed out on what God wanted to do through him. And yes, God still uses Moses, but it was through Aaron that Moses spoke to his people. When all along, God just wanted Moses. He just needed Moses. Moses let his own doubt blind him of the confidence that he should have had in God. Now, if you've been in that space, or if you're in that space now where you're lying to yourself this way, let me remind you of this. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. He doesn't send you out without first going before you. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that it won't come without some stress or some heartbreak. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to listen to you. But he who began a good work in you will carry it out to completion, because we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. The devil may come and lie to you and tell you that you can't do it, but I know a God who is more than capable to take a messed up sinner with little ability and use them to do great things, not because of what I can do myself, but because of what he can do through me. But we have to trust in him. We make excuse after excuse to feed into the lie that we're not good enough, that we're not skilled enough, that we're not qualified enough to be used by God, because we've placed the focus on our own narrative. Now, before we close today, I want to backtrack a little bit and go back to Exodus chapter 3 to point out something very important that will kind of help us take this and apply it to our life. In Exodus chapter 3, verses 13 through 14, Moses asked God this question. He asked this: suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what's his name? Then what shall I tell them? God says to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me. Now, I'm sure Moses at this point is asking God, like, that's really the name you're asking me to use? Like, God wouldn't work? Like, you want me to go back to these people and say, I just spoke with I am? And he's like, yeah, tell them I am sent you. And on the surface, that may seem confusing at first, but it is a name that should speak confidence into your life. A name that should reassure you. See, our own narrative, our own story puts us in position where we're constantly saying, I am this, I am blank. And we can fill that blank with positive and negative things. But what God does with this simple explanation of his name is that he shifts the narrative and he puts the focus back on him. And when we start to see God as this name, when we start to call God I am, we start to see the reality of who we truly are, which is I am not. If he is I am not. But we don't have to get discouraged because of this, because it leads to this truth. I'm not qualified. I am not qualified, but I know I am. I am not good enough, but I know I am. I'm not the solution to this problem, but I know I am. I am not in control, but I know I am. I am not, but I know I am. See, this view takes the focus off of our story and puts the focus on his story. On our own, we may feel ordinary, we may feel small, we may feel insignificant in the grand scheme of things, But the truth is that God is looking for ordinary people to play significant roles in his unfolding story. He's not looking for the perfect guys. He's not looking for the capable. He's not looking for the most skilled, the best communicator, the one who has their life all together. He's looking for the willing. He's looking for the ones who will trust his plan over their own. He's looking for the ones who will say, "Here I am, Lord, send me." When God told Moses, "You go and do all of these things," he was implying that, Moses, I can do this on my own, but I'm choosing you, and I can do it with or without you. When he calls you to do something that seems big, he's going to do it with or without you because he's God. What he wants to happen is going to happen. But what he is telling Moses and what he is telling you is that he's looking for the right person, the right partner, someone ordinary that he can use to do something extraordinary. When Moses asked the question, "Who am I?" God simply affirmed him with these words. He said, "I will be with you." When God calls us to step out of our comfort zone and do something for him, when he invites us into his story and assigns you roles that seem too big for your life, he's always going to affirm you with these words, "I will be with you." But to have this view of the truth, we have to let go of our fear. We have to let go of our doubt. And when the focus is on "I am," then the possibilities of what we can do and the impact that we can make go far beyond our understanding. I want everybody to stand in this place as we go into a time of worship. This is going to be a little bit different. Our prayer team can come up front. They'll be up here for prayer. But the focus today is, what lie are you telling yourself? How do you feel unqualified? What are you not doing for God because you feel like you're unworthy to do it? What are you not doing for God because you feel like your skill doesn't match up? You have to put your focus back on God. We're going to sing this song, "Who You Say I Am." And these words should ring out with so much truth in them today after we've talked about this. Because when Satan comes to you with a lie and he says you're not good enough because you've done this, this, and this, or he says you can't do that because you don't have the skill. God didn't gift you with that skill, so what are you even thinking? You remember what these words say. I'm chosen. I'm not forsaken. I am who you say I am. I know, God, that if you call me to do something, you're going to equip me to do it. You're not going to call me into a place and then leave me out to dry. You are going to take me and you're going to qualify me. You're going to equip me and you're going to use me to do great things for you. Because the truth of it is if you're in this place right now, if you're watching online and you have breath in your lungs, God has placed you on this earth not to take up space, but to actually do something that he has called you to do. Not something that I can do, but something only you can do. But you have to answer his call. You have to be brave enough. That's the thing about God. He gives us choices. It's up to us to respond. Don't look up here at me or any other pastor or this worship team and think like, I wish I could do that because they're making such an impact. Because you can go out into this world and into your place and into your connections, and you can reach people in ways that I'll never have the ability to do it. So don't just sit there and think that your job is worth nothing because you're ministering to people wherever you're at. Don't let a title take you away from what God's actually called you to do. So if that's you today in this place as we sing, don't feed into the lie that Satan tells you. When he comes at you with that mess, when he tells you you're not good enough, that you're a failure and you're not skilled enough, you look at him and you tell him that you are because you're chosen by one who's greater than he is. So let's sing this out together in confidence. Come on.